Hello, I'm Christopher Badger.
And I'm Mark Davies.
We're barristers at Six Pump Court and would like to welcome you to this latest Environment Law News podcast, brought to you in association with LexisNexis.
Thanks, Chris. In this podcast, we'll be looking at the Financial Conduct Authority's feedback statement on its discussion paper, Climate Change and Green Finance, the Environment Agency's pollution statistics for 2018, and whether Nuisance might play a role in contemporary environmental concerns.
Right, first up, the Financial Conduct Authority's feedback statement, following its recent discussion paper on climate change and green finance.
Absolutely. The feedback statement summarises the responses received and sets out the next steps that the FCA proposes to take.
And there are three outcomes that the FCA wants to enable. First, that issuers provide markets with readily available, reliable and consistent information on their exposure to material climate change risks and opportunities. Second, regulated financial services firms integrate consideration of material climate change risks and opportunities into their business, risk and investment decisions. And finally, that consumers have access to green finance products and services which meet their needs and preferences, and that they receive appropriate information and advice to support their investment decisions.
Now, some of the feedback from those who responded to the discussion paper noted that challenges exist in determining the materiality of climate change risks, which I take to be a rather roundabout way of saying working out what impact climate change will have is difficult.
I think that's pretty much it. Generally, amongst the responses, there was support for climate risk disclosure and the development of internationally agreed standards and metrics, which should help with determining the materiality of climate change risks. Although concern was raised about the short-term results culture in finance, which may be limiting the growth of the green finance market, and the need for FCA engagement with industry.
I think that shifting the arguably institutional short-term culture in finance is going to prove difficult, but I do hope I'm proved wrong. But anyway, following the responses, the FCA proposes to publish a consultation paper in early 2020 proposing new disclosure rules aligned with the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures recommendations on a comply or explain basis, together with clarification that existing rules require disclosure of all financially material climate-related risks.
And the FCA will also propose rule changes requiring independent governance committees to oversee and report on firms' ESG and stewardship policies by the end of 2019. Whilst the FCA intends to engage and consider the proposals of the European Commission's Sustainable Finance Action Plan, relevant to products and services, particularly around product disclosures.
I think that the feedback statement demonstrates a significant level of engagement by the FCA on the subject of climate change risks, and it does provide a clear outline of the work that it intends to take from now through into the second quarter of 2020 and beyond.
Okay, enough green finance. Next up is the Environment Agency's pollution report for 2018.
Absolutely. Now, to give it its proper title, this is the agency's report Regulating for People, the Environment and Growth 2018, and it sets out some of the key statistics for 2018.
So principal points to take away include there were 533 serious pollution incidents in 2018, up 27% from 2017. Illegal waste sites continue to increase, up 5% to 896 new sites found by the EA. 12,690 tonnes of unsuitable waste was prevented from being exported, saving the UK economy approximately £1.1 million in avoided repatriation costs. 52 enforcement undertakings were made by companies in 2018. And the number of operators with environmental permits ranked in bands D, E and F increased to 439, up from 385 the year before.
So a relatively mixed bag of good news and bad news then. It seems like some money has been saved, but serious pollution incidents and illegal waste sites are still on the up.
And that's right, but less than half of the serious pollution incidents were attributable to industrial activities with environmental permits. 81 were attributed to illegal waste activities. 56 were caused by water companies. There were 67 attributed to natural causes compared to 26 in 2017. This includes dry weather as well as other extreme weather, which was a notable feature of 2018.
Right, okay. And I believe there are also some interesting statistics in the report about gas. Interesting is, of course, a relative term. And in 2018, permitted landfill sites released 149,000 tonnes of methane gas into the air, which is equivalent to about 14% of the total methane emissions for England. What's interesting is that methane emissions from the landfill sector have decreased by 61% since 2008 and by 12% between 2017 and 2018. Now, it's reported that this reduction in emissions is due to a combination of a drop in landfill gas production and improvements in landfill gas collection, both of which are very promising.
Well, I've got an even better statistic from the report. There were 133 million overnight holidays and day visits taken to the seaside in England in 2017, worth £7.4 billion to the economy. Over 400 bathing waters at beaches and lakes were tested for bathing water quality. Compliance with bathing water standards was 97.9%, with only 9 waters receiving the lowest classification of poor.
That is a truly excellent statistic. What a lot of ice creams and donkey rides. I think it was also interesting to read, though, that the average British person produces 76 kilos of plastic per year, far more than, for example, some of the Scandinavian countries like Sweden and Norway, where the average is 18 kilos. It is, however, we are doing significantly better than the US, which averages 120 kilos per person per year.
Well, that is something, I suppose.
Yeah, you've got to look for the good in these reports. Our final topic for this week is a conceptual one. Can the law of nuisance play a part in contemporary environmental concerns, or are legislative and regulatory developments all that we have?
Yes. We live in times when reports of real damage caused by climate change and air quality now make their way onto the front pages of all print and social media reports. For example, a couple of weeks ago, many newspapers reported a study from King's College London, which discussed significant spikes of admissions to hospital on account of strokes, asthma, and other acute conditions. These, along with 36,000 deaths a year, are said to be attributable to air pollution.
Those are some pretty scary numbers, those ones, but there are already measures in place to try and control the effects of contemporary causes of pollution, significantly traffic emissions. Take London's emission zone scheme, for example.
Well, that's right, but ultimately that's based on a series of complex statutory provisions allowing for charging. But those arguably do little more than mitigate the problem, and they place no real control in the hands of individuals directly affected.
And this is it. This is where public nuisance has traditionally provided a means for individuals to obtain remedies to control pollution. Given that highway authorities have ownership of the highways, it is difficult to see why parents of school children, for instance, would not have direct private law rights to insist that highways authorities take real action to protect school areas.
Indeed, the likelihood of those rights arising only seems greater in London, given the overall control exercised by TfL. It's worth looking at the case of Southwark London Borough Council against Transport for London from the Supreme Court last year.
Indeed, and everyone will know that certain NGOs have examined whether public nuisance might provide a means of taking action in cases of climate change around the globe, for instance in respect of rising sea levels. So this isn't a completely novel idea. But the historic problems have been that causation and rules restricting special damage make such actions impracticable.
Well, quite. I mean, now we're seeing more reliable evidence available, at least in the context of air quality, such as that King's College London report. The question is whether we're going to see individuals insisting on their private law rights in UK courts.
I'm quite sure it won't be long until someone gives it a run.
Thank you for tuning in for this Environment Law News podcast. For more information on any of these stories, or if you would like to discuss any of the topics raised in more detail, please contact Six Pump Court on 0207 797 8400, asking for either Christopher Badger or Mark Davies, or contact our colleagues at LexisNexis in the PSL Environment team.